Mr. Kip Sorensen, good to be back. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm a step down from you and Sean. You guys seem to make the pretty dynamic duo. So I think I'll be calling on you guys more often.
Yeah, we had at least one person say good job. So,
Well, I had two. So now you're up to three. I actually know
three.
that
There you
probably
go.
was one person that emailed both of us. So you're up to two instead of three.
I wasn't
No,
sure if you got the message, so he sent you the same one. Actually, now that I think about it, I think it was Sean who sent you the message. So
All
maybe
right.
that doesn't count.
Basically, you guys didn't do that great a job, and nobody thought so. No, I thought it
fun.
was. I thought it was
fun.
awesome. I thought obviously we hear from you each and every week, so that's always good. And then Sean brought a different element and dynamic to the equation, and it's good from my end to know that I can let go of the reins and hand them over to you guys, and things will go smoothly, and you won't completely blow up what we've tried to create over this last 6 years in a period of 45 minutes. And it's also good for our audience too, because they get to hear from other men who might have some differing viewpoints or different ways of looking at things, but are still on the same path. And there's value in that as well.
Yeah. Well, and I was saying, you've been really busy. You've been all over the US, it seems like, this past week.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. I went to Houston and interviewed Dan Crenshaw several weeks ago. And then last week I went to Atlanta and met with Jesse Itzler, which was amazing. Such an incredible human being. And then immediately within a 24-hour window, flew to Detroit, and I met with Jason Wilson, who is also a phenomenal human being. His interview, as of the release of this podcast that we're doing, just came out yesterday. So you're going to want to make sure you catch that one, because it's very, very powerful. One of my favorite conversations to date.
Awesome.
And not to mention, we also had a couple of meetups too. We did one in Houston. We did one in Detroit. I was going to do one in Atlanta, Houston. Yeah, that was our Houston meetup. Houston's in Texas. I don't know if you knew that or not. And then our Atlanta one, I was going to do it, but I was just so crunched on time. I just couldn't make it work this time, but we're going to do more of them as we travel around a little bit.
Cool. All right. Well, we have some questions from Facebook from last week. You want to go ahead and dive into them?
Let's do it. Let's jump right into it.
Yeah. And these are to join us on Facebook. You can go to facebook.com/group/order of man. First question, Chris Silverstreet, homeschooling for those of us on the fence. Is there a plan to send the kids to college or trade school? Is the first question. And then second, what about if they want to go back to public school?
So regarding having a plan, I don't have a plan because it's not my life, right? I have things that I would like to see, but once my kids graduate high school, it's their life. Like, they get to decide. So I don't know at this point if they're going to want to go to college, if they're going to want to go to trade school, if they're going to want to get right into business. I don't know. And that, frankly, that really isn't my decision to make. I'm going to talk with them about the pros and cons of all different options, including college. I think there are some pros, in spite of me talking a lot about the cons. There's also some pros too. And so we'll talk about those things, and then ultimately help them make a informed and educated decision about what they want to do and how they want to progress with life. So that's their decision, not mine. But again, we'll talk about it. As far as, what was it, plans for going back to public education? Was that the second part of that question?
Yeah. What if they want to go back to public school?
So my oldest son, he just started football, and a lot of people asked me, because they know he started football, where are my two oldest boys playing? They're playing through the city league. So they're not old enough to be in high school yet. So they're playing on the city league teams. But my oldest son has expressed interest in potentially going back to public school next year, and he'll be a freshman next year, because he says, Dad, I want to hang out with the guys on my team, and I want to meet girls like this. These are some of the things that are on his mind. And those are healthy considerations. So him and I will be talking about that. And his mother, my wife, will be talking about that. I'm not totally opposed to it. Again, contrary to what people might believe based on what I say. And I want to be very clear about something. When I talk about the public schools failing our children, I think that's true. I believe that's true. But that isn't a referendum on many school teachers, some, sure. But I have school teachers in my personal circle who I think very, very highly of. And I think they would readily admit that there's a problem with government schooling. And you can go back and listen to other podcasts. That's not what this question's about. So my son and I and my wife are going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the pros and the cons. And if we do decide that maybe he goes and tries for a year at public school, we're going to be very, very vigilant about the process. I'm going to be very, very involved. What are you learning? What are you hearing? What's not being shared? Who are your school teachers? Who is your principal? What books are you reading? What is the administration like? I'm going to school board meetings. Like, we're doing all the things because this is my children, and I'm not willing to risk handing them over to a system that I'm not totally familiar with. So if we do decide we are going to go down this route, we are going to be rapidly vested in the entire process. You can bet on that for sure. And we'll be very vigilant about what's taking place and how lessons are being taught. And there's going to be some things that my children, frankly, are going to opt out of. And if a teacher or the school board or the principal or the administration has a problem with that, well, then we're done. But they don't get to decide for my child. I get to decide for my child. And we'll pick and choose based on what we feel is appropriate. And if they can't handle that, we're all out in that case then.
Copy. All right, Cecile Graves, what's your guys' weekly family meetings look like?
I've done the weekly family meeting thing. I've done sporadically in the past. We've been very methodical about it. We've been very loose about it. We've taken this from a bunch of different perspectives, but I've always considered looking at my life as a series of experiments and what's going to work best, from my daily plan to my daily planning, to my evening routine, to what I do during the day, how much time I spend towards one thing versus the other. But family meetings is also another thing. So right now, it really consists of intentional dinner time. I've talked about it in the past where every morning we get up and we talk about this and we strategize. We haven't been doing that for a little while. And mostly, I hate to say that that's because we're busy. They're busy. I'm busy. Trish is busy. Like, we've got all of our own things going on. And so we've had to deviate from that a little bit, but we've never deviated from doing family dinners together. And family dinner isn't like a time where we just eat and like whatever happens. No, my wife and I are very, very intentional about it. In fact, just yesterday, we went to breakfast. We were supposed to go to one of my son's football game. We didn't realize it had been canceled due to COVID. So we drove an hour to realize nobody's here. So instead we went to brunch, and we were sitting down at the restaurant and we asked good questions. Like I asked a question like, hey, if you could go on vacation anywhere in the world, where would it be and what would it consist of? And my wife asked, what's one thing that you've always wanted to try that we haven't tried yet? And so we're constantly asking these powerful questions so we can get into the minds of our children and figure out what makes them tick. Outside of that, we do a walk, I would say, around the property, which is a mile. It's a mile loop. Exactly. Actually. We do that every, I would say, 1 to 2 days. And so we did that yesterday. We went on a family walk, and my oldest son was, I'm not going to get into all the details, but he was struggling with something, but he really didn't want to share it with me. And so everybody else kind of went forward and me and him hung back. And I tried something that I hadn't tried before based on the conversation I had with Jason Wilson. I said, hey, I know something's bothering you. I want you to look in my eyes and tell me what's wrong. And he would look into my eyes for a minute, and then he would like turn away and say, I don't know. And I said, no. I need you to look into my eyes and tell me what's wrong. And when he finally locked eyes with me and he was willing to at least do that part of it, he shared some things that he was struggling with. And it was a very powerful moment that we had. And again, I'm not going to get into the details, but we're just very conscious of making sure that we create the space and the margin to be able to have some of these conversations. And we never go into it haphazardly or wondering what we're going to do. We're just kind of letting it happen organically. We're very, very intentional about it. And that's what our family meetings consist of currently.
Love it. All right. David Denton, a bit of a long one. My brother-in-law is in a dark place. His job has led him to suffer some PTSD and has changed the man I once saw as a brother. He has been cheating on my sister and now disassociates everybody in his life. I told my sister that she can have everything, including, and he told my sister that she can have everything, including their 1.5-year-old daughter. Question for you, Ryan, is how would you reach out and constructively tell him to pull his head out of his butt before it's too late?
That's tough because Kip, you and I have talked about this at length. You can only help people to the degree that they want to be helped, and everything else is futile, right? So if you're going to go in there and beat your drums about why he should be doing this and shouldn't be doing that, if he's not open and receptive to that, it's just going to fall on deaf ears. And in fact, actually, probably that's not even the right way to say it, because it actually may create more rift and animosity in the relationship, especially between him and his wife, which sounds like is your sister. That's what I'm assuming. It's his sister's
his brother-in-law.
husband.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, or I guess it could be his wife's brother, right? We don't know. But regardless, there's only the ability to help so long as he is interested. So rather than go in and get on your pulpit about what you think is right and what you perceive as being wrong, and I think even objectively, we would say cheating on your wife is wrong. Objectively, most of us would say that that's true. Yeah. Even guys who are cheating currently on their spouses know that it's wrong, because if it wasn't wrong, then they would just proudly declare it, that they've got 2 women, but they don't declare it. So they know it's wrong. So rather than getting on your pulpit and explaining all that and talking down, maybe the best approach is just to come with a level of some empathy and just to strive to understand. So Kip, if it was you and me in that relationship, I may come to you and say, hey, Kip, you and I have had a good relationship over the past 5 or 10 years, whatever it's been. And I'm worried about some things about what's going on with you. And I know you've had some issues with your wife and stuff like that. I'm just worried about you, man. Can we go grab a beer? Or can we go to the game? Or, hey, can you come over tonight? Or can I come over to you? And if he's open and receptive to that, good. That's a step in the right direction. That's it, right? So you're moving in the right place. Then Kip, you and I get together and the conversation might be as simple. And I would do it over something so it's not as threatening, because otherwise he may feel like it's an ambush, right? It's like, hey, can you come over? And you have like 5 people there and intervention. You said it. Like you don't want it to be an ambush. But if you said, hey, let's just go grab a drink after work tonight. And so we get there. It's inquisitive. It's like, hey man, like I know what's going on. You're stepping out on Cindy, and I know there might be some contention there. And first and foremost, I want to tell you, whatever we talk about tonight is between you and me. And by the way, when you say that, that actually has to be true. Like you can't go back and report it to your wife or your sister. You can't do that because you have to be a man of integrity. So, hey, I'm worried about you stepping out on Cindy, and I'm worried about some of the behaviors I've seen you engaged in. Man, you just don't seem like the same guy. Like, what's going on, dude? And then allowing you the space to talk. And I'm going to get a very clear picture as to whether or not you are interested in fixing the situation or you're not. And I just have to be okay with whatever you're at right now. Like if you're not interested in it, I just have to be supportive and understanding. I had a guy email me the other day or shoot me a message on Instagram. And he said, he sent me a message and he said his son came back home last night and they haven't talked in over a year, it sounds like. And his son was drunk and he was disappointed in that, but he was glad that his son came home at least. And they had a conversation and some words, some good words, some powerful discussions that needed to be had. And part of the reason I think that worked is because at some point you have to let go a little bit and realize that everybody else is going to make their own decisions and you're not their savior and you're not their dictator.
Yeah.
You can't force them to do something. All that you can be is influential and hope to lead them down a better path that's going to serve them and other people better. And just listening. with as minimal judgment as possible, and just listen and say, man, I'm really sorry you're struggling with that. What can I do to help? And not coming in there from this position of authority, perceived authority, where you're trying to like manipulate, maneuver, and fix, and just say, hey, I'm here with you. Like, something I can help you with, something we can do together, and just get a bearing of where he's at. Yeah. If you do that enough and he genuinely sees that care, it may not ever be rectified to the degree that you want it to be, but I think that's a better way of handling it than saying, you should do this, you should do that, you're not doing this wrong, or right, you're doing this wrong. It's just, that's not going to work. I know with 100% certainty in fact, that's going to exacerbate the problem. So just be open. Care.
One thought that crosses my mind is, I mean, obviously you have to have established a relationship, right, to be in a position to provide some guidance and direction to someone. But
actually, hold on, Kip. One thing right there. Let me interject just real quick. You don't have to be in some relationship in order to ask questions.
Correct.
Right. For example, if we're an employee-employer relationship and we don't really know each other, like, I think I could still say, hey, Kip, like, I've noticed a change in you. Everything okay at home?
Yeah. But and you ask me that, and being genuine is a form of strengthening our relationship.
Definitely. Yeah. Continue.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the thing that crossed my mind is, and I want to be really clear, I don't think you would tackle this from a space of manipulating them, because it's going to be obvious that all you're trying to do is manipulate them. But what I think is powerful is if I know that a friend of mine is struggling with a relationship, let's say with his wife, it's actually a great time for me to pause and have a breakthrough in my relationship with my wife. And actually look at where I'm coming up short. And then when we meet and he says, hey, how's things going? Dude, things are going good. Man, major breakthrough in my relationship. Oh, what was it? Man, I realized I was coming up short this way. I was out of integrity in our relationship, and it really has like helped us. And you share, like, honestly, from a place of integrity and really just like expressing yourself and what you learned and what you got out of that circumstance. The power of that is it allows him to evaluate that for himself without you saying what you should do. And that's the power of testimony, if done correctly, versus preaching. Is it's just sharing. It's non-threatening. Hey, this is what I learned. This is what I'm getting out of this. And I'm just sharing this breakthrough that I had in my relationship. And then he decides if he wants to evaluate that for himself or whatever. And it might even present an opportunity for him to like go, geez, man, like, I never even considered that. And then he'll naturally maybe evaluate how he's showing up in his relationship. But I have to be really clear. You're not going to do that by manipulating him, because it's not going to be true. And you're going to come across wrong. So just use it as an opportunity to look where you're coming up short and share that breakthrough with other people. And whether they latch onto it or not, it's up to them.
It's a great point. One of the things I've done with even my wife is, how men want to solve the problems. So our wives come to us and they say, this thing is going on and this thing is happening, and I have this experience. And we're like, well, you need to do this, this, and this, and this. It's so clear in our minds, right? We're probably wrong, but it's so clear even in our stubbornness. One thing that I've been a little bit more intentional about is just using this phrase, but phrase it whatever is going to be the most genuine and authentic for you. Is, man, that must be really hard. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
So my wife would come to me with a problem. I say, man, I could see how you'd struggle with that. What do you think you're going to do? That phrase right there is so powerful. It's non-judgmental. It's action oriented. It's putting the responsibility where it lies. It's not attempting to solve anybody else's problems. It's not belittling. It's not talking down to. It's such a powerful phrase. Yeah, that's a pickle you're in. That's a rough spot. What do you think you're going to do about it? Yeah. And being genuinely concerned with it, right?
Yeah. And what I love about that, Ryan, is it's following your thoughts to a conclusion, which I feel like so often we don't do, right? It's like, oh, this is wrong, or I don't like this scenario. Trust me, we all have a great list of complaints. And I say this with my wife about our teenage kids all the time. It's like, well, what's the conclusion? Like, you need to finish the thought. Okay, this is how I feel. So then what? But yet we never conclude the thought. And so we just drudge along with no action being associated to how we're feeling.
Well, and then what we do as men, and I would say leaders, is we get frustrated because our people, I've used that term, and I want to be clear, like with our people, what it means is your family members, your colleagues, your coworkers, your employees, your church congregation, the people you have a responsibility for. And we get so frustrated that they won't follow through. So we start directing. Well, you're not finishing it. Like, you got to do this and this, and then it backfires.
Yep.
Create some space for them to follow through on their own, like guide them towards the path they need to be on. And the one last thing I'll say about this, Kip, and I hit on it a minute ago, but it's really important that we talk about this, is we need to be better at compartmentalizing conversations. And I go back to the thing that if you and your brother-in-law in this case have this conversation, that's a conversation between you and your brother-in-law. If your sister-in-law was invited to the conversation, she would have been invited. If your wife or your sister, whoever it is, was invited to the conversation or was supposed to be part of that conversation, she would have been invited to the thing that you guys are doing, but she wasn't, which means she's not invited to the conversation. I've got a friend in my own personal life who has shared some things with me over 5 years or so now, personal things, business related things. And it's interesting because he quite often prefaces with, hey, this is just between me and you. And I said, look, we've had conversations like this for 5 years. Has there been a time in our history where I've ever shared any of the personal information that you've ever shared with me? Of course, the answer is no. The reason he feels like he has to do that is because that's a rarity.
Yeah.
There's probably other relationships that he's had in his life where he shared something personal that wasn't supposed to leave the walls of the room that we were in, and somebody else caught wind. My default is not that this is open for everybody. My default is this is only between you and me unless otherwise instructed. Not it's open for everybody unless otherwise instructed. The default is this is between me and you unless there is some sort of express or implied idea. For example, like you and me on these AMA podcasts have never said, hey, we can talk about anything and it's going to go out to the world because it's implied, right?
Yeah.
But if you and I, but yeah, oh wait, these are recorded and
what?
And hundreds of
On
thousands
YouTube?
of people are listening to this.
Yeah.
But if you and I are having a conversation, the default is it's a conversation between me and you, no one else.
Yeah.
Unless you tell me otherwise, or I tell you otherwise. And in that case, yeah, sure. But let's just make sure we hit home on that. I know it's tempting to be like, oh yeah, I talked to Billy about this, hon, and here's what he's thinking. She's going to rush right to her sister. And that's your fault. And that's going to create a bigger problem. So just keep your mouth shut and honor the relationship you have with your brother-in-law and the conversation that you guys may have had. Yeah, and when your wife asks you, it's as simple as this. Hun, look, I know you want to hear about this. I get it. But Billy and I talked, and I committed to him that I would keep that between me and him. And I've got to honor that. That's a more respectable position than flapping your gums, even to your wife. You're undermining your own authority with your wife. What a horrible thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
I said authority. I would say undermining your own credibility is probably the better word.
Yeah. One thing you said earlier that I think it's important to touch on is why it's not effective for us to jump in for our quote unquote people and tell them what to do, and the importance of them being self-directed, or for them to come to their conclusion of what that conclusion is, right? What that action is. Do you want to talk about that briefly? Because I just think that's so critical, whether it's employees or your kids, that there's self-direction, that the decision of what needs to get done is part of their creation, and why that's important.
Well, really the only reason I think you would do that, meaning that you're going to explain to them everything they should do, is a very ego narcissistic way of looking at things. First, it suggests that you actually have it figured out and you don't. You really don't, because you're dealing with your own stuff, maybe even similar issues. But also it creates a sense of dependency, right? That now, but that's ego driven. Like I want people to be dependent on me because I want to be the central figurehead of my family or my employment or my organization.
Or even, and maybe even just a little selfish, like, cause I do think like a parent they want the best for their kid and it's genuine and true. However, what they're failing to realize is eventually Tommy moves out. And if he's been relying on you to tell him what to do all the time, he's going to fail. Right. So I do think that there's this
good point,
this false sense of like guidance of this is what's best for him by telling him what to do, when in reality it's not.
Well, and it's also harder to help guide people through the process versus just saying, just do 1, 2, 3, you're done, you're good.
Yeah.
It's definitely harder there's a great book. It's on my bookshelf here somewhere called Coactive Coaching. And I've used it a lot in my coaching and consulting practice, my financial planning practice, order of man stuff, even parenting and leading a family with my wife. But Coactive Coaching is a great book. But yeah, it just creates this sense of dependence. And you said it perfectly, little Tommy or whatever is going to move out, or you're going to die. I might die this afternoon. Like I have no idea what's going to happen this afternoon. And if everybody I've ever interacted with is just relying on me, like you and Sean did the podcast the other day. We have some pretty clear expectations about what needs to be done, but I didn't micromanage that. Like you guys can figure it out. In fact, you shot me a message and said, "Hey, Ryan, should we do this or this or this?" I'm like, I think this would be a good idea, but I'll leave it in your capable hands. And I fully trust you. Like I didn't think that conversation would go south, and it didn't because I trust you guys. And if it did go south, then you and I would have got on the phone and we would have had a conversation and I would have said, "Hey, let's correct this and this and this, but we're good. Let's go."
Yeah.
But I want people to be independent. And that's a non-ego driven perspective that I want Kip, you to be better than me. I want my kids to be better than me. I want people to excel past what I would create. My oldest son is very involved in sports. He's in football right now, but he's involved in competitive lifting. And I hear from him quite often how incredible his coach is, his lifting coach. Like, oh, he's this and he's that, and he's incredible. At times I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear about how incredible this guy is anymore, because it's like threatening, right? It's like, well, what about me? Again, egocentric versus non-egocentric. And this is the point that I get to is, no, I'm glad he has another male role model. I'm glad there's somebody else in his life outside of me that he trusts and that is a hard worker and our values are aligned and he's helping him. This guy, his name is Sean Moore. He just did his own meet, 1,600 pounds or somewhere right in there between the bench and the deadlift and the squat is what he put up. The guy works like a maniac. He's also his assistant football coach. Like I think really highly of Sean. I'm not going to undermine Sean, even though sometimes when I have to hear from Brecken say, "Oh, well, Sean, this and this and this," I can't do some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But also I'm like, oh no, that's good. That's actually healthy. And that's something I have to wrestle with at times. Like it's actually healthy that he has somebody else who can help outside of me. But that takes us dropping our arrogance and our pride and our ego and really consider what's in the best interest of our children or our wife or our employees or our friends.
Yeah. And one last thought, because I think it's so valuable, is from a business perspective, I think we can tie this in, the importance of having the employee committed to the desired outcome and not to the action. Right. So if I'm working with the employee and we say, okay, on this particular project, the desired outcome is to accomplish these goals. And we don't focus on the how per se, but the desired outcome, and they're committed to it and they're self-directed, then they find a way. Right. Like, and when roadblocks show up, they go, oh, I know what the desired outcome is. And I know where I need to go. Right. I know what the destination is. But when we micromanage, we go, oh, well, you take a right here, you take a left here. but they have no idea where they're going. And when roadblocks come up, it almost forces us to constantly have to micromanage because we've never brought them in to be dedicated or to be committed to the actual desired outcome or the destination that we want them to accomplish.
Yeah, good point. There's another thing here too. We could riff on this all day just off this one question. Is let's take an employee relationship. When your employee, when you give them the commander's intent, right? That's what we're talking about here. Here's my intent, totally. Make it happen. I trust you. I hired you. I brought you on because you have a talent. I'm going to bring this person in because they have this talent. Here's my intent. Go make it happen. Now you're empowering your people. But what I've seen a lot of people do, what I've done in the past is, so your employee, let's say, Kip, I task you and somebody else with a project. You come to me and I look at it. And I'm like, this thing is going to fail miserably. I shouldn't probably say that directly unless there's going to be severe ramifications of what you're doing. Like if you're going to put somebody else or the business in danger, I'm probably going to course correct that very, very quickly. Yeah. But if it's not going to be in danger, it's just going to be a little bumpy, maybe because of the decisions you and the teammate try to make. I might try to guide you like, hey, Kip, you're doing this thing. What are the positives of doing that? You give me a list. What are the potential downsides? I might help you explore some other potential downsides that you don't see because you don't have the experience yet in this particular thing. Yeah. And then ultimately, I'm going to give you just enough rope to like hang yourself with. Not where it's going to kill you or be a detriment to anybody, but just enough to feel the pain of it. And so then we come back and I might say, man, look, Kip, I'm a little nervous about this because we've never done it this way. And other times we've done it this way and it hasn't worked, but like, why don't we try it? Yeah. As long as here's my conditions. We're going to try it. And in 30 days, we're going to come back and we're going to revisit, but we're both going to be very honest with each other. If it failed miserably, you're going to be honest about it. If it succeeds wildly, then I'm going to be very honest about it and tell you that it has. Can we commit to that at least? Yes. Okay, good. It's empowerment. It's like, it's basically what you're saying. You're complimenting somebody. You're saying, I trust you. I'm skeptical about this working, but I trust you. And I know that whatever it goes, ownership. That's what it is. Yeah. No, not even that. Not even that. Because still as an employer, the ownership is with me. It's a transfer of trust. It's a transfer of goodwill. It means I care about you. I trust you. I respect you. But we can't let go of the ownership. That I think there's a distinction there.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point. And what's interesting about this too, Ryan, is I think most of the time in the example that you gave, it's not right and wrong. It's just our opinion, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I think it should be this way. And our way and their way is equally probably effective. But we're opinionated about how it should be done, and it's probably soft and unmeasurable whether it was like right or wrong. And it's part of just like letting it go a little bit and letting people be creative. At least that's what's been true for me is it's like, I don't know. I get locked into how I think it should be done, whether it's right or wrong is a whole different story. So,
there's also strategy, which is, this is the path I want to go down. And there's tactics, the way to implement that strategy. And so you might come to me and say, well, here's my strategy and here's a few tactics I have for completing it. And I might help you shore up those tactics, or you might help me see something I've never seen before because you have an experience I don't have. But that requires us to both be open and honest with each other about it, regardless of the hierarchies of responsibility or power or authority. Yeah.
And that's the benefit of you and I being on the same page of the desired outcome, because it's not about how it's done. It's about our commitment to actually doing it right. Mm-hmm. And it allows us to kind of keep those egos in check a little bit more, right? And admit when something works or doesn't work. So should we just keep going on this one question for the rest of the time?
I was going to say, I don't even think we're on that question anymore. I think we're so far off on the question, which was helping a brother-in-law with some issues that he's having and a path that he's not going down. I think we're so far off at this point. So hopefully we gave you some things to consider and then some.
Worst case, David, you can be more effective with your employees at work if the whole thing doesn't work out with the brother-in-law.
Exactly. It's very closely connected.
All right, Jeffrey Outlaw, share some tips, tricks, and strategies for networking with high performers. Concrete tips. Pretend it is a day one with zero contacts.
Okay, so adding value to a scenario is sometimes difficult because you may not have a particular expertise or skill set. And so adding value might seem out of the realm of possibility. There's a very easy way to add value to people's lives where you actually aren't the one that has the expertise and experience. All that you have is the connection. So you can get very, very good at adding value to people's lives and in turn building out your professional network by knowing people and by being able to look for problems and figure out the solutions. And figuring out the solutions, listen to this, guys. This is very, very important. And I'm going to share with you a personal story that happened 10 minutes before.
I was going to say, do you have an example?
Okay, yes, perfect. 10 minutes from before we started recording. Sometimes it's just making an introduction. So you listen for a problem, because for solving a problem doesn't mean you need to solve the problem. It means, this goes back to what you were saying earlier. It just means you need to provide a solution to the problem. Sometimes you might have the answer, and sometimes you might have a connection to the answer. So you should be listening for problems and also listening to other people for solutions. Because at some point, I guarantee it's going to happen where somebody in your network is either going to come to you or just say something in passing, and they're going to articulate a problem they have. And then you're going to go through your mental Rolodex and you're going to say, okay, who do I know? Who do I know? Oh, I know this guy. All right, let me reach out to this guy and connect him with this person who has the problem. Let me reach out to the solution, connect him with the person with the problem, and then I'm done. And I'm going to share with you a personal example of how this works. And then I'll share with you some tactical missteps and how to fix and correct those problems. Okay. So I'm not going to explain names or anything like that because just out of the sake of privacy, but I had a friend of mine who reached out to me and they just secured a new business and they're trying to grow their new business. And I know that this individual is trying to grow their business in this capacity. And I have a couple of people who I think would be great clients for this individual. So I reach out to this individual. I'm trying not to be vague, but like I have to be vague. Okay.
Yeah.
So I reach out to this individual with the problem. He's trying to grow this new business that he just secured. And I said, hey, I have a couple of people that I need to introduce you to because I think that you guys would form a good partnership. And he said, that would be great. So I reached out to 4 individuals and all 4 of them said, yes, I would like an introduction. So I made an introduction via text, sent them both an introduction. And at the end of the text, I always say, hey guys, I'm going to bow out from here. I'm going to let you guys do what you need to do. Hopefully something works out. If not, at least there's a good connection. And I'm honored to be able to make an introduction for people I'd really admire and respect. Best wishes. That's the value. I didn't have to do anything except for send a text. If it works out, I win twice. I win with the person who has the problem. I win with the person who has the solution. And I'm the hero. And I didn't have to do anything. All I had to do was send a text. This is a great way to add value when you don't have specific expertise about a project. But it requires a lot of front end work because you actually have to care about people. You have to listen for people's problems and you have to file them. And then you have to listen for what solutions other people provide and you have to file them. And then you have to figure out a way to connect the two. So I'm just pulling up my phone because I just did this. Now there's a very strategic way to do this. The way that let me tell you the way you don't do it. You don't make assumptions and think that just because that person has a problem, that person you think has a perceived solution, that automatically
do an introduction.
Connect them. And no, don't do that. I have people do that literally every day. Literally. Hey, Ryan, I think this guy would be a great guest for your podcast. And I included him in this email. Bro, you just created a bunch of work for me. Like not only did you not add value in that interaction, you detracted from it because you put more on my plate. Now I have to send another email to this individual, especially if I'm not interested, saying I'm not interested. And then you paint me out as the dick. Thank you. for doing that. I really appreciate all the value you added to my life. And some people would say, well, I'm just trying to help. Don't. If that's your idea of help, don't do that, because it doesn't work. It's not good. So here's the very strategic, tactical way of doing it. Let's say, Kip, you need an introduction to Bob. And I feel like this would be a good relationship, but I don't know. I'm not going to make assumptions, because you have some software available that would really help Bob with a problem. Here's what you do. Hey, Kip, I know you have a solution for X, Y, and Z. And I have somebody I think who would be really interested in your services. Are you taking on new clients, and are you interested?
Yeah.
And you will say yes or no. If you say no, say, hey, no problem. If you ever need something, let me know. I have a couple of people I think I could introduce you to. If you say yes, I say, great. I have Bob over here who is an expert at this and this and this, and he really needs what you have to offer. Can I make a connection? And you say yes. Good. What's the best way to do it? Text, email, phone call? How do you want me to set it up for you? And you say, why don't you just send it to us a text? Great. Got it. I'm going to reach out to Bob, make sure he's good with that. We're good to go. Now, I hang up the phone with you. I get on the phone with Bob. Hey, Bob, I know you've been having a problem with your user database. And I've got a friend. His name is Kip Sorensen. He's been specializing in this stuff for 20 years. He's got some software that he's been telling me about. And I don't know all the ins and outs, but I know that people really appreciate Kip. I know him personally. He's a good friend of mine. So he's a trustworthy guy. And it seems like he's doing good things. You interested in the solution? Bob's going to say, actually, yes, I need a solution to that. Good. I'm going to make the connection. Or he might say, hey, you know what? No, I'm not really interested. I actually just hired another firm and I feel pretty good with where we're at. Hey, no problem. If you ever need another solution, let me know, because I got a guy. Then I get back on the phone with you and say, hey, Kip, you know what? I talked to Bob. Man, he just hired somebody last week. But like, if things change, I'll let you know. No harm, no foul.
Yeah. Right?
Hey, at a minimum, you think, hey, Ryan went to bat for you. That garners some trust and some value. Now, if Bob says, yeah, I need somebody, I'm glad you brought it up. Good. Kip said text is the best way for introduction. Does a text thread work for you? Yeah, it works great. Now that you have permission from both parties, then and only then do you make the connection. So I make the connection. I take I don't need a novel. Just, hey, Kip, this is Bob. I talked to you about him. Bob is a hyper successful entrepreneur. He's been in the business for 20 years. And he's had this need come up, and I thought you'd be good. Bob, this is Kip. Kip's a personal friend of mine. He's also been in his industry for 20 years, and he's doing some amazing things. I really don't know all the intricacies, but I have faith that he can help guide you towards the right solution. So I sell you both on each other. And then the last thing I say is, I'm going to bow out from here, but I'm really glad that I could connect two people I'd really admire and respect. Best wishes, guys. Then there's another little step here. I personally, because this is an introduction I made, so I'm giving you a little bit of my trust with Bob, Kip.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Like you're borrowing my trust and credibility.
Your reputation. Bob. Yeah,
it is. So like, if your reputation was on the line, do you just let it ride? Of course you don't let it ride. You ensure that it stays where it should. So then a week later, or 2 or 3 days, or whatever's appropriate, I reach back out to Bob. Hey, Bob, I introduced you to Kip a couple of days ago. Like, how did it go, man? Like, did you guys get a chance to talk? Or are you guys going to work together? And I just follow up. And then I reach out to you, Kip, and I say, hey, Kip, I know I introduced you to Bob, and I don't know if you guys had a chance to talk or if you're going to be working together, but regardless, it's fine. I just want to know where things are. And I make the connections again. It's a very strategic way of doing it, but it's important. I've been doing this for 20 years. It's important you do it this way. Don't do it any other way, guys. This is the way that you do it. Okay. Please do it this way. And if you don't, you're on your own. I don't have your back. But if you do it this way, I won't need your back, because you'll be able to handle it just correctly the way you need to.
Yeah. And it helps you also, right, to know that I did a good job for Bob, because you don't want to go contact Fred and say, oh, I got this guy Kip, and maybe I dropped the ball with Bob. Right. And you should probably know that whether I, fulfilled on my word of that bargain or not. And if I didn't, you should probably stop referring me to people. So it's also valuable for you to understand like how it went.
Yeah. Great point. Yep. Really good point. Cool.
All right.
What else?
Travis Smith. What's Travis Smith? Who's next? He says, you hit Shapiro, McConaughey, Crenshaw. Feels like those are some huge names.
Yeah, I mean, those are popular guys, of course. Ben Shapiro, Matthew McConaughey, Dan Crenshaw, who else? Jason Wilson, Jesse Itzler, Michael Chandler. Like, these are all guys. I feel bad naming names because I'm going to forget people, but these are all guys I've had on the podcast over the past, I would say 4 to 8 weeks, and maybe even longer at this point. So I don't know. You tell me, like, who do you guys want to hear from? And don't say regular guys.
Yeah, because we tried that before. It doesn't work.
Well, no, not even that, because all of the guys I just listed are regular guys.
I love that. Yeah, good distinction.
Like, Michael Chandler is not a superhero.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro doesn't have access to information that you haven't heard before.
Yeah.
Like that's not the case. We put these guys on pedestals they don't belong. And I say that with all due respect to the guests that I've had on. But I'm not going to put Goggins on a pedestal he doesn't belong. I think highly of him. I think he's got some stuff figured out. I question some of his stuff. But like, I'm not going to put him on a pedestal, but he's just a regular guy. So I'm not willing to separate myself or isolate myself from these high achievers. What I want to do is I want to become more like them. So I need to see myself in them. Okay, what is this regular guy doing that is extraordinary, that will help me produce extraordinary results? So, but to answer your question specifically, who's next? I don't know. Tell me who you want to hear from. I'll keep working on my end. My dream guest, I'll tell you this, my dream guest right now is Keanu Reeves. If any of you can work that in and make that happen, I'd be really, really just, that'd be amazing. That's my number one guest right now.
I wonder if he would be more open to it with Matrix coming out in December.
Yeah. Matrix 4 is coming out.
Maybe does a little road show.
I mean, let's be real here though about it. Like, does he need the Order of Man podcast to promote Matrix 4? Probably not.
No,
but
it would certainly make him more manly than he is if he got on the podcast.
Totally. He'd be like John Wick on steroids, like the Hulk John Wick.
Yeah. He could actually call himself John Wick if he came on the podcast, but until then,
he would become John Wick instead of playing John Wick.
Totally. We'll just insult him and see if he'll come on for that reason.
Yeah. I think he will. Let's just like poke at him and taunt him. That always works. What are you, chicken? You don't want to come on the Order of Man podcast?
What you need to do is figure out where he trains in California. Just drop in and roll with him, and then get him in a submission. Yeah, and then say,
submit him on the podcast. Say, I'm only going to let you go if you commit to a podcast. I know where he trains with his firearms training. I know that, and I have a couple of mutual friends who have actually trained there. So maybe we can work those angles.
Yeah, we have strategy now. We followed that thought to a conclusion, and now we're taking action.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right, Jordan Higgins, do you have your son take hunter safety class, and if so, and why not?
Do I have him take hunter safety? Well, yeah, because if he wants a hunting license, then he has to have his hunter safety done.
It was a silly question, but I wanted to why is that important? Is what I'm hoping that we can talk about. But
why is I'm having a hard time. Like, why is hunter? Because so you can get your license. That's it. It's ridiculous.
You don't think it provides value other than that?
No,
I think it had some good value in there.
It doesn't add value because I'm a good dad.
Yeah, and you've already taught him these things, so
of course,
and the class is unnecessary.
So when he goes to the class, he runs circles around kids that don't have a good dad who have taught him that stuff. And I'm not trying to knock on those other kids. I'm just saying, like, you think you should have had this covered already. You think some institution or organization that's sanctioned by the state is going to do it better than I could? I'm offended. I'm insulted by that. No, look, the reality is being aware of safety when it comes to hunting is a valuable thing. Hunter safety is important because it allows him to get his license. But there's a difference between hunter safety, the course, and teaching him to be safe while he's hunting. And those are all things that we've talked about at length and explored and done and worked towards. So yes, being safe is important.
So I'll help you out here, Jordan. So for those dads that don't know, right, and that
No, no,
don't
no,
know
no,
what
no.
to
Hold
teach
on,
their
hold on, hold on,
kids.
hold on.
Take-
No,
you
hold on.
take the class,
No.
learn, study, and then
Okay.
teach your kid.
All right. Yeah,
Is that
I'll agree
fair?
with that.
You
Yeah,
could use
I
it
would
as a
agree with that.
resource.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with that. Because I was going to say until you finished it. So I was interrupting you before you finished the thought, which was a good thought.
Yeah.
Is if you don't know, then you figure it out so you can teach your kid. So
Yeah.
valid point, Kip. Valid point.
Yeah. Just don't send them off and then, you don't learn yourself. Right.
Well,
Sure.
that's
All
what
right.
a lot of people do, and or maybe you do, maybe you don't know anything about hunting and you send your kid to hunter safety and then like let him teach you. That's okay.
Yeah. And then still go learn yourself. So
Still,
then that
yeah,
way
you want to
didn't
get a
miss
third
anything.
party, yeah, instead of having an 8-year-old teach you about how to handle a firearm, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Paul Evans, how did you find a publisher for your fabulous book? I don't think I've heard your book be referenced as fabulous. So new category.
You're running the wrong circles then,
Fabulous.
Kip. If nobody in your circle is calling my book fabulous, then
Fabulous.
what kind of circles are you in?
Yeah.
What was it? How did I find a publisher?
Yeah. How did you find a publisher?
This was interesting. So I'll make an announcement here in a second, but with Sovereignty, I actually started, I was going to self-publish it. I started writing it and I paid for the artwork and the development of the way it looked and the wording and the fonts and all that kind of stuff. I hired my own editor. She was editing it while I'd write a chapter and send it to her, and then she'd edit it while I was writing another chapter, and then she'd send it back to me. She was amazing. It's actually a brother in our Iron Council. It's his wife. That's where I found our editor. So I try to use resources from people who believe in what we're doing and support what we're doing, because that just seems right to do. And she did a phenomenal job on it. And so we were writing the book, and then I go to conferences and events and I meet people, and I have a pretty good network because of what I shared with you earlier about adding value. And I came across a gentleman who owns Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press, and he reached out and said, "Hey, we want to house this book as one of our own." And I really had everything done at that time. And so I said, "Look, I'm pretty much done." And he's like, "Well, I'll help you with the distribution model." And that was actually very valuable to me because I didn't know how to distribute it to anybody outside of Amazon. And I didn't want to just have it printed as a paperback. I wanted hardcover, paperback, audiobook, Kindle, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So the value that he added to me and his organization is that they could help with the distribution model of all 4: paperback, hardbook, ebook, and audio version. And so he said, "Well, look, if you already have it done, like we'll work that into the deal and negotiations and contract. We'll handle distribution, and here's the agreement." And so I worked with them, and I had a good relationship with them, and we put out a good book. And it was as simple as that. But I guess the moral of the story is like, just get to work, like write the book, just start writing. You can figure out this other stuff.
Yeah. Finding the publisher is probably the easier part, I assume.
I don't know if it's easier, but you can't sell a book you don't have, and you can't so that's important that you have a book.
Yeah.
Now, the announcement I'm going to make is that nobody, and I haven't shared this because it just happened a couple of days ago. I just signed the contract on my second book with a publisher. And a literary agent reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is what we do. We're going to help you get put together a book proposal. We're going to pitch it to all of the major publishers, and we're going to work out the best details and best contracts and get you the most money and the most favorable terms." And so I've been working with a literary agent for the past 6 months or so, I would say, somewhere in there. And yeah, we just signed a contract just a couple of days ago. As of the release of this podcast, about a week ago, we signed the contract. And so the next book will be coming out in 2022, late 2022. So be on the lookout for that. But I had a literary agent who helped me with that, with a publisher.
Yeah. And so they agreed upon almost like a subject and the book and everything before it's actually written.
Yeah. Typically what happens in the publishing world is you submit a book proposal. And so a book proposal might include the title, the subtitle, the theme of the book, the promise of the book, the chapters, and how it would be laid out, and the sections. And it's all subject to change within reason. But usually what a publisher is going to buy is the rights to that book based on a book proposal. And in the book proposal, they're also going to look at, we have a pretty large and expansive network at this point. So they're looking at that, and there's value in that, right? So they're looking at that.
Is there a market outside that network?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So fortunately, over the past 6 years, we've been building, and this is why I say it's kind of a multifaceted approach. It's like Operation Shock and Awe. A lot of guys will say, hey, I want to write a book. I'm like, well, who are you going to sell the book to? I don't know. Okay, well, so maybe you should build an audience. Yeah, but what am I going to say? Well, maybe you should write a book. It's like, you got to do everything at once. And the book, I think, is a little further down the road. I wouldn't say that you should just write a book before having an audience, because you're going to write a book, but you don't know, is anybody even going to resonate with that? But I've been doing this for 6 years. Like, I know what words and what phrases and what topics are important to men because I've been studying it for 6 years. I'm pretty sure I have our audience dialed in, right? But I'm building an audience. I'm building a podcast. I'm building a speaking portfolio. I'm building a network of other men, 350 plus men that I've had on the podcast now. And now when I go to sell a book, it's like, look at all of our assets.
Look at all these resources.
Look at everything we have. And that's pretty enticing to a publisher.
Yeah. Copy. All right. Chris Gatchko, how do you process grief? Ryan, you mentioned in Friday Field Notes about working through tragedy and getting up to do what you've committed to do, regardless of the tragic situation. But how do you personally choose to process the grief in a healthy way so it doesn't linger and become a hindrance or a problem at a later time?
This isn't something I'm really good at. I don't even feel qualified to answer this question because for me, it's like, okay, well, shit happens, charge on. And, you can feel down and upset. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's okay to be sad and to be angry, or all of the entire process of going through that. But I'm still not, I'm just not great at it. I frankly, I would rather suppress it and drive on because I got other shit I need to get done.
But I think that's, to Chris's question, that's what we all do, I think, by default, right?
I think so. I mean,
not that it's right or wrong, but
well, it is wrong. I genuinely think it's wrong. I don't think it's healthy. I've never thought it's healthy. There's a time and a place where we need to repress some of that and actually do the mission. Sure. But I think there's also a time and place where we need to acknowledge and deal with it. And so part of this, what he's talking about specifically, is our dog died a couple of weeks ago. And I got back from an errand, and our dog was in the hospital with a neurologist because it was having some brain issues and some neurological function problems. And so I got back from an errand, and I just pulled into the driveway, and my wife comes out of the house and she opens the passenger side of my truck. Sometimes I sit in there when I get home in the air conditioning, I like send out messages and texts and whatever. And so I'm sending out texts, and she comes in and sits down next to me, and she's teary eyed, and she tells me, and she's like, do you want to go down and say goodbye to Sarge? And I'm like, hell no. Cause honestly, when we took him to the vet, like 24 hours earlier, I actually said goodbye because I was fairly certain that we were going to have to put him down at that point. Like, that was in my mind. And I'm like, I already said goodbye. I'm not going to say goodbye. And then I just thought about it for a minute. I'm like, well, there's two things here. Number one, you need to honor your dog. Your dog's been here with you for 4 years, has literally traveled the country with you, has protected you and your family, has honored what we're all about. I know this sounds weird hearing it, that this is a dog, but this is the dog. Like, it's part of the family. And so I need it. Like, the dog has honored me. So I feel like I should honor the dog. But also my children need to see that. Like, I can't let my wife go handle it with my kids. What a sack of shit I would need to be for them to go deal with it and not me. So there was a lot of reasons I felt I needed to go down. And so I went down, and the doc said, hey, long story short, we decided to have the dog put down because it had an inoperable brain tumor that was causing loss of function in his legs. He was losing vision, and some of his internal organs were struggling. They're starting to shut down a little bit. So we made the decision to put down the dog. And the vet asked, okay, we'll put down the dog. Do you guys want to be in here when it happens? And my 3 youngest said no. And I was okay with that. Like, I understand. So they went out into the waiting room, and they waited. But my wife and me and my son, and I didn't want to be in there for that, but my son and my wife wanted to be there. And so I needed to be there for them and the dog. And so they put the dog down, and then we took the dog from the hospital, put him in the back of the Suburban. And my oldest son and I said, "Hey man, we need to go dig a hole." He's like, "I don't want to dig a hole for the dog." I'm like, "It's our responsibility, man. Like, it sucks. It's a tragedy. It's a hardship. It's not fun. Like you're going to bury your dog." This was Brecken's dog. And I'm like, "You're gonna have to bury it." And so I said, "Let's get some shovels." And so we grabbed some shovels and we spent 30 minutes digging a hole for it. And that sucked. You're digging a hole for your dog. And then we buried it, and we just said a few words. Like, they didn't want to say a few words. I said a few words about, not so much about the dog, although I did, but more about like how we deal with loss and how this is part of life and how we should remember the good times and the things that he did well and how we enjoyed having him and the memories that we had. So I feel like the best thing you can do is confront it head on. That included burying him. That includes talking about him. So I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea to. Here's what I would say. Go listen to my podcast from yesterday with Jason Wilson. He's way better at this. And I'm learning, and I'm trying to learn from guys like him and other people. Just go listen to that podcast, because we had an hour and 20-minute or so conversation about processing our emotions. So go listen to that. Way better than anything I could ever do. I don't know. Do you have some thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think there's different grief, right? I think some grief is interpretation, and the suffering that we feel is our perception of something, right? And I think you process that by owning the fact that you created that, you know what I mean? Some of that meaning. And so let's say I have grief with an abusive parent. It's like, well, the grief I'm dealing with is that they didn't love me. Well, is that necessarily true? Right. And so I think there's that kind of grief. And then there's just grief of like losing a loved one, which there is no interpretation other than the fact that like being grateful that you had your time with them,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, maybe I'm demented, but like Asia and I, we've talked a little bit about, it seems like I've been doing a lot of funerals of late. And I told Asia, I'm like, you know what? If my pallbearers are rolling that casket on a stupid cart, I'm going to get pissed. You carry that shit out. You rise up and you carry my body. And me, like if I had to bury my father tomorrow, I would prefer, I don't know why, but it just feels like the right thing to do. I would want to dig. And I should be the one talking about my relationship with my father and not sitting on the front bench and just listen to everyone else talk about him. Yeah. Like there's a sense of like honor that comes with those things, I think. And for whatever reason, that's kind of like when I die, like I want the people that I love most sharing their feelings, right? I want them to carry my body. I don't want to, have some flimsy, crappy cart with wheels, you know what I mean? Moving my body around. Like I think there's a sense of rising up that there's an opportunity to rise up in those moments a little bit, but I don't know.
Well, look, I mean, I hear you on that, and you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah. But everybody's so different, and I respect you for what you're saying, but and this sounds funny, but this is actually true. I told my wife, hey, look, when I die, don't you go out and buy a $10,000 casket for me. Like, don't you do that. Like you go out and maybe your dad wants to build a pine wood box and you bury me deep enough where I won't float to the surface in a muddy, rainy day, because that would be disgusting. But like, if you spend 10,000 on a casket and 10,000 on the funeral and do all the flowers and all the bullshit, like I will come back and I will haunt you. Like just bury me, like treat me with some respect, some dignity or whatever, but just put me in a pine wood box, bury me where some place I liked that I enjoyed being around, and then like just drive on and just apply, hopefully, any lessons maybe you learned from me at some point along the way. And I'm not wrong either, right? You're not wrong. I'm not wrong. All of us have different perceptions. Some people want to be burned and cremated. Other people want to be buried. Some people want all the lavish extravagancies and all that stuff. Like it's not wrong. it's not wrong. And I guess the point that I'm making here is one of the comments that I made when we were burying our dog and I was talking with my kids, as I said to them, I remember vividly because I think it was an important moment. And I was actually a little surprised that it came out of my mouth, but I felt compelled to say it. I said, look, you guys can grieve how you want. You know, if you want to be sad and you want to cry, then do that. Like be sad and cry.
Yeah.
If you want to laugh and tell jokes or tell funny stories about Sarge, you know, do that. And you don't have to feel bad about laughing because Sarge died. Like I remember when I went to my grandma's funeral, I expected it to be this like really somber event, and it kind of was. But then afterwards, there was a little gathering at I think it was my aunt's place, and everybody was laughing and smiling, and they were telling jokes and stories. And I was like, "What is this?" Like I didn't expect it to be like that, and I just realized, oh, everybody's just processing it, like in their own way. And sometimes telling a funny joke about something silly grandma did, or you know, a funny story, and everybody laughs. Like that's okay. Like it's okay. You can laugh. Why can't we laugh?
Yeah.
And
Celebrate
I just
them.
exactly. And so I remember just telling my kids, I'm like, look, no, you can just grieve how you want. If you want to cry, cry. If you want to laugh, laugh. If you want to laugh 1 minute and cry the next, do that. And that's okay. All of it's okay. You just got to figure out what's going to work for you. So to Chris's point, what's the best way to do it? The way that works for you, like works for you. Don't bottle it up. Go listen to yesterday's podcast. I think that one might help too.
All right. John Finch, similar question. Actually, it's perfect segue here. What is Ryan Mickler's desired legacy? And what is the most important lessons you teach your kids to help define and support that legacy?
You know, I have a lot of things I want to be remembered for, I guess, but sometimes I also kind of think that's narcissistic. So like, oh, I want them to remember me. I don't know about that. I just really want them to apply the lessons. And if that means they need to remember me,
whether they own it or make it yours, who cares? Yeah.
That's really all it is. You know, if you're asking what would I want people to remember me by, I would say that I would like people to remember or recognize the fact that I was willing to try things. You know, if I had even a remote interest in something, I wanted to build something or to try something or to do something, that I was always willing to try wholeheartedly. And if it worked out, it worked out. If it didn't, well, at least dad or whoever was willing to give it a try. And that's what I would want to be remembered as. But I hope my legacy is so vast. And I don't mean by population, by numbers. I mean, so like rich and dense with certain individuals that it literally permeates every fabric of who they are. You know, with my children, like not so much, it's not even that I would want them to say, oh, dad taught me this one thing. I just want them to act and behave a certain way that will serve them and other people well. And maybe they don't even recognize where it comes from, because it's so entrenched in their DNA because of all of the lessons that we had over 20, 40, 60, 70 years on this earth together. So that's what I would say.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, man.
I love the example of this I always give is Asia's grandmother. They call her Meme, which is French, right? And she was from France. And you know, she's passed away now. She's probably maybe 12 years or so. But the influence that woman has on her children and her grandkids, without a doubt, exists today. You know, like her influence is still there. It's still about, you know, pleasing Meme and what would she say and making her proud. And it's almost like she's never left. You know, even my daughters, ironically enough, they're like, oh, I love Meme. And we're like, she died before you were ever born, but they know who she is. And they could tell you about her, as weird as that is. Right. But it's weird. Because she's awesome. So ingrained into their lives, you know? So I think that's good inspiration, actually.
For sure.
All right.
Let's take one more question. Yep. Let's take one more.
You know, let me scroll down here.
Pick the best one.
Down to a good one. Nah, that's not a good one. No, I'm
just so you guys know, while Kip is trying to find this, Kip is judging you and your questions. He has a color-coded system where he does green, yellow, and red. If you're red, you're an asshole. If you're green, you're probably still an asshole, but you got a good question. So just want to let you know where Kip's coming from on these.
Yeah. And we have a special color. And then those guys we just removed from the Facebook group.
Outer darkness, like, black.
That guy should They're not banned. Even be around.
This is where censorship comes into play. And you guys are, you and the black are censored forever.
All right.
Indefinitely.
I got one. I think this is a good one to wrap up with. Lance Wallace. Do you have any tips and resources for controlling anger and letting go while in the moment? I struggle heavily with this. I'm a new IC member and I plan to address this in my battle plan, but I was wondering if you had any tips and resources I could look into. Specifically, when my wife and I get into a disagreement, I usually let my anger control my actions and I get loud, I yell, and etc. to where everyone can hear me, including the kids. Obviously, this is a problem I need to address. Any help is appreciated. Thank you for what you do.
Yeah, I've got a couple of tips for you just from personal experience, but you said something in here that is very, very important, and I want you to acknowledge it. And you said it right. And I'm paraphrasing here, so correct me if I'm interpreting it wrong, Kip. But you said, I allow my anger to create my actions or something along those lines.
Yeah, I let my anger control my actions.
Control my actions.
Yeah.
So what you've done here, and this is exactly right, what you've done in this sentence alone is identified what so many men fail to recognize, that your emotions are not synonymous with your response. Because what a lot of guys believe is that anger,
they shouldn't get
means
angry.
You're punching the wall. No, well, maybe, or that anger is punching the wall. No, anger is anger, and punching the wall is the reaction. They're different. And sometimes they're linked. You're angry, so you punch a wall. You're angry, so you punch your wife. Or you're depressed or upset about something, and so you drink. So they're not synonymous, guys. And this gentleman recognizes that. It's because you wouldn't have said, I let my anger control my actions. You acknowledge that they're two separate things. So what you need, well, look, I won't write it out, but imagine, get out on a piece of paper. And on the left side of the piece of paper, just write anger or greed or jealousy or happy or sad or whatever. Write your list of emotions. And then, so that's a column going up and down on the left side of the paper. On the right side of the paper, write your natural response. Anger, yelling. Mad, throwing things, hitting things. I've punched walls before, right? Like, okay, now what's in the middle? Nothing, right? It's blank. You have a left column, which is your emotions. You have a right column, which is your response. And in the middle is nothing. And if what I found is the smaller the gap between your emotion and your response, the more likely it is that you're allowing your emotion to control your response. Let me say that again. The smaller the gap between your emotion and your response, the more likely it is that your emotion is controlling your response. What you need to do is create a larger gap. Specifically, you have a problem flying off the rails, a larger gap between the emotion and the response, because then that gap is a void. And in that void comes logic and reason and clarity and judgment. And if there's no gap, there's no void to fill in with logic and reason and clarity and judgment. So when you are getting into it with your wife and you're upset about what's going on, you need to acknowledge that you're upset, create the margin. Hey, hon, I'm upset right now, and I'm really trying to work on allowing my anger to control my reaction. So I just need 10 minutes. I need a half an hour. Now, you can't run away. I didn't say that. I said there's a gap. It's not an indefinite do nothing. You can't run away. You have to address it. It's just a gap. And so you say, I need a half an hour. And then you go to your room, or you go to the golf course, or you go outside and go for a walk, or you go play with your dog, or you go work out, or you do whatever it is you're going to do, but you create a gap. And then in flows the logic and the reasoning and the discernment and the judgment. And you start thinking about it and you start asking yourself different questions, right? Like, why am I angry? Well, I'm angry because she does this thing. Well, why does she do this thing? Well, she does this thing because she doesn't understand. Why doesn't she understand? Well, maybe you come to the conclusion that you never explained how you feel about things. And if you have enough space to actually think about it for a minute, look, you can always go back and punch the wall. Like if you wait 30 minutes, like if normally your response to anger is to go punch the wall or to yell at your wife. I know this sounds funny, but like if you wait 30 minutes, you can always go back and punch the wall. You can always go back and yell at your wife. Like that's not off the table. But I don't think you will do that. I think you'll have enough clarity to think, you know what, man, I was angry at her, but actually she was right about some things. And then you go to her and you say, hey, you know what, hon, I was very angry about what you said because it made me feel this way. And the reason I think I feel this way is because I don't feel valued. And it came to me, it dawned on me that I never really explained to you what I feel like I do that's valuable around the house. And I'm really curious if this is valuable to you or what maybe I can do more to add value to your life so that you do appreciate our relationship. But that can only come in a gap that you've created that can be filled with all of those thoughts and the ability to ask yourself questions. So what's the phrase? It's something about like stimulus and response, like it's coming to mind. I can't think of the phrase. You guys probably know what I'm talking. There's a quote about like stimulus and response. I can't even remember who said it, but anyways, create the space, create the margin, and it's going to be better. Just work on that. When you feel yourself getting emotionally charged, like even in happiness, like I don't get overly happy about things because like, why would I do that? You know, like if like the book deal, I just closed on the book deal. My wife said, why aren't you more excited? I'm like, well, I'm just trying to process it all. Like, I don't know, maybe like tomorrow it goes away. Like what if I'm overexcited and then it fails. And then I just created all this excitement over nothing, like just chill. So I try to take the highs and the lows off of it by just creating some space and just mellowing everything out. That works for me because I tend to be this.
I only laugh because Asia does the same thing. She's like, why aren't you happy? I'm like, well, you know,
just hold up. Like, let's figure it out here. Like, what if the publisher comes back and says, no, never mind? Or, you know, what if, whatever, it doesn't work? Like, just tap on the brake a little. Sometimes you got to tap on the accelerator. Sometimes you got to tap on the brake, but the key is to like maintain the same. There is no cruise control. That's all on you. And you're the one who has to maintain it based on what you're trying to accomplish.
Totally. Yeah. So I have a sample, an example of this scenario that I think might be powerful to share. So Asia and I, difficult situation occurred 3 months ago and she didn't tell me. Issue escalated and sits down and says, oh, hey, honey, by the way, you know, this happened 3 months ago, blah, blah, blah. Right. And I was like, completely pissed. Right.
Totally.
I'm like, hold on. This is a big deal. You didn't think it would be valuable to let me know 3 months ago. And then she gave me a reason. And I immediately was like judgmental of the reason. Well, that's a lie, right? You're not telling me the truth and it's something else. And I had to add some interpretation, had to let it go. Exactly what you're counseling. I had to walk away from it and say, okay, you know what? I need to process this. Now, unfortunately for me, it was like a day and a half because I was pretty pissed. Now here's the irony. I didn't have a solution. I didn't work it out in my mind. Like there's no like resolve, but I still needed to talk. And so, and I came back to her and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And I'm like, first off, let me express this, right? My interpretation by you not informing me about this and waiting 3 months, it makes me feel that you don't appreciate my insight, my opinions, that I'm not valued, because otherwise, why wouldn't you bring it up? And it ruins trust for me in our relationship. I don't know what to do with her right now. I don't have a resolve. I don't have a solution, but I want to let you know that that's how I interpreted that action. And my ask is that we're on the same page. Right. And then the conversation, and in hindsight, actually, and now that I'm saying this right now, just in case she's listening, ironically enough, as I say this, I'm like, what I should have also said is my ask is that we sit down on these difficult situations and we talk about it. And if there's concerns on your part of, well, I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid that you would blah, blah, blah. Well, then when we talk about it, you bring up those concerns. Hey, I have something to tell you, but my concern is that you're going to overreact and you might, do these things. And that's a valid concern. And then we can have a conversation around it. Now, for full honesty here, I don't think I said that last part. I'm pretty sure I didn't actually.
I'll get a text from her and she'll tell me what
exactly.
Really went
She's
down.
like, no, he did not. Yeah. But the point
maybe we'll bring
is,
her on as our guest next week.
Yeah.
And actually, we'll bring you both on as guests, and we'll do a little therapy session.
We'll just go raw. But the point is actually me, even though I didn't have a resolve or a solution, I needed to communicate it.
Mm-hmm.
Because me being passive aggressive and just walking around pissed off and not having the freedom of expression back to her on an important matters. And I don't know, and I might be unique and different from other guys, but so much of our conflict that does show up in our marriage, it's actually a limit, or it's because we're not expressing our feelings. Not necessarily like we're having to fix things. We're just not expressing them. And there's a lot of power in me coming to the table and not going, hey, when you did X, that was wrong and blah, blah, blah. No, if you listen to what I said, when this occurred, I interpret it as this, and it made me feel this way. That way, I'm not accusing her either. And it allows her to also decide to own and say, well, that's not what my intention was. My intention was this, and then you can have some dialogue around it.
Yeah, because I guarantee when you approach your woman about, hey, when you don't tell me these things, here's how I feel, and you don't trust me, you don't respect me, all these things that I think I don't think you're different. You said maybe I'm different than other guys. I don't think so. I think all of us deal with that issue.
Yeah.
And then I guarantee she's going to come back and she's genuinely going to believe, she's going to be like, I don't believe any of that. Like, I trust you. I respect you. I've had conversations, not recently, but years and years ago, where I had conversations like this in just glimpses of like a mature husband. And my wife has told me, no, I don't, it's not that I don't, none of that stuff. I'm just afraid of what you'll do. And then I hate to admit, but I'm like, well, you don't have to be afraid. But then if I think about it, I'm like, oh shit, I'm bigger
has
than
my
you.
record proven, has
I'm
my record
stronger
proven
than you.
That she should be. Yeah.
I punch walls when I'm angry. I diminish you. Like, I use my words to hurt you. And then I have the audacity to say, you don't need to be afraid of me. Oh shit. You're afraid of me. That's why you're not telling me things. And that's a kick in the balls. But it's also something we need to come to the realization of. Because if that's the case, and she's like, who listening to this podcast wants their wife to be afraid of them? Not a single person listening to this. And yet, how many of you have wives who are afraid of you?
Or kids, or
yes,
a wife that's afraid of you on behalf of the kid.
Yeah, that's something we ought to wrestle with, guys. Is like, is she afraid of you? But there's the margin, and then but again, that comes back to what we were saying about the margin. Like, that creates the rational thought where it's like, you don't have to be afraid. What are you talking about? You don't have to be afraid of me. It's like, whoa.
As you punch the wall.
Right. Slow down. And then when you slow down, you're like, oh yeah, got it. I would be afraid of me too. Like, I would be afraid of my dad in that situation. If he acted the way that I act, I would be afraid as a kid or a woman, somebody that's supposed to be able to trust you. I'm only speaking from experience, guys. Like, I'm not pointing fingers at you. I'm saying this is the realization I came to. This is a large part of the separation that my wife and I went through 12 years ago. She was afraid of me, and I wasn't willing to admit it. And you know what? She was probably right to be afraid of me. I never abused her. physically. I never assaulted, nothing like that. It could have very easily turned into that, though. If it would have went down the same path, it could have very, very easily turned it. And I hate to admit that, but it could have.
Yeah.
And so, something to be aware of. Great questions today. Not ending on like a solid note, because I'm like, dang,
Yeah, it's a little depressing. Yeah.
But I think it's something that a conversation that needs to be had. And we're about having serious conversations, like real issues and real things that we're dealing with. And that's a big thing a lot of you guys are dealing with. So I don't think we need to change it from there. I think we ought to just ponder on that.
Yeah.
Bring us home,
And
Kip.
to continue to level up with us. We had a brother earlier on, join the Iron Council. He's getting on the path in regards to, putting, if you remember the question, it was like, hey, I'm planning on putting this on my battle plan. I'm seeking accountability within the IC to address this issue. And that's exactly what we do in the Iron Council. So to learn more about the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. And as always, to follow Mr. Mickler on the socials, you can follow him at Ryan Mickler, whether on Twitter or Instagram. Events are full. Stay tuned, subscribe, make sure that you're following, whether it be on the podcast or Facebook, on the socials or YouTube, and future events. You got to stay connected to Mr. Mickler to know if there's meetups happening as he's traveling around. So,
yes, sir. Plus, I think we're going to get to the point where we just can't, like we had 23 or 25 people in Houston, another 25 or so in Detroit. And I usually do them at my Airbnb, wherever I'm staying. So like, there's going to be a cap on these things. So just make sure you stay in touch so you know where I'm going to be and know where we can connect. All right, guys. Appreciate you. Great questions today. Let's keep the conversations alive and let's keep doing what we need to do. So go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.